Lot number 14 is a coco de mer. They are the most mysterious magical objects of the natural world, and they come from one or two islands in the Seychelles archipelago in the Arabian Sea. When they were first discovered in Europe, people thought that they had grown in the Garden of Eden, and local folklores of the Arabian Peninsula used to say when they washed up that they had grown in great forests beneath the ocean. I'm personally obsessed with coco de mer, so I'm incredibly grateful to the person who donated this. I'm very excited that it's in the Scheherazade Foundation auction. I've written a story to go along with it. I've called it The Wondrous Seed, and I want to thank the person who donated it because it allowed me to let my creative juices loose and to come up with this story. So thank you so much. So lot 14, The Wondrous Seed and the Coco de Mer.
Once upon a time, before the great continents had risen from the seas, there was an island known by its inhabitants as Pop-Tika-Pai. Little more than a tiny speck of dry land in an endless expanse of blue, it was a paradise. The people who lived there had no contact with anyone else, but they were the happiest folk you could ever hope to meet. They spent their days in the forest, down at the water's edge, or at the ancient altar which was in between the two. The people of Pop-Tika-Pai sang and laughed all day long, and when they slept, they smiled. No one there ever wondered whether they were the happiest people in all the world, because they assumed they were the only people in existence. Once in a while, what looked like an object would be seen far in the distance, the size of a pea running the length of the horizon. When such an object was spotted, the people would gather at the great altar and sing a song in honor of the ancestors for revealing a little magic to amuse them. No one on the island went without food or fresh water. They fashioned themselves clothing from the fibers of palm fronds, and when the summer storm raged, they would cluster together at the altar, singing a song of wonder and woe. One day, much like any other, a little boy called Salap went down to the water's edge to search for shells. He was kind, thoughtful, and the apple of his parents' eye. If there was anything that singled him out from the other boys, it was his inquisitive nature. So Salap was paddling in the water, looking for shells, when he spotted something bobbing up and down. Curious as to what it might be, he waded out, grabbed the object, and hurried back to the beach. Squatting on the sand, Salap examined it. It was unlike anything he had ever seen before. As wide as his torso, it was wooden, curved, and quite alluring. Unsure what to do, Salap carried it up to the beach and to the home where he lived with his parents in the shade of the great palm tree. Within 10 minutes a crowd had gathered, everyone wishing to see the peculiar object that little Salap had found. One at a time they leaned forward and touched it, laughing and singing with delight. "It was sent to us by the ancestors as a musical instrument. Listen how it rattles when it's shaken," an old woman cried out. "It is a float to use in fishing," yelled someone else. No, corrected a third. "It's a throne on which the leader of the island must sit." All day the people of Pop-Tika-Pai chattered, laughed, and sang about the object that Salap had discovered in the sea. And all night long, each one of them imagined what they would use it for. The morning after the curious object had been discovered, the man who had assumed it was a float grabbed it and ran out into the water with it to show the others. The ancient, who had thought it was an instrument, yelled out that the fisherman had stolen it. Then the man, who thought it was a throne, snatched it away from the fisherman. Positioning it close to the altar, he sat down on it and sang triumphantly. By nightfall, the harmony of the island was lost. Everyone, from the smallest child to the oldest and most wizened crone, wanted to have their time with the object. Accordingly, a rota system was drawn up in which everyone, irrespective of gender or age, was permitted a few minutes with the object. But despite good intentions, the system caused infighting and hostility right from the start. Everyone, it seemed, accused everyone else of taking too long when it was their turn. As the days of the rota progressed, the people of Poptikapai began treating the object too roughly. One of the little boys dropped it against a rock, and the outer cover of the fibrous husk fell away. All the people came together in sorrow. For the first time in as long as anyone could remember, the laughter and the singing ceased. The people of the island were truly sad that their beloved object, the one thing which had brought universal delight and joy, was damaged. Calling everyone to the altar, the leader of the community ordered that they would do what they always did in times of uncertainty. They would ask the ancestors what to do. And so, as the sun slipped down below the horizon and dusk fell, every mouth whispered a plea to the ancestors, asking what to do with the magical object from the sea. All night the people of Poptikapai whispered, and all the next day and through the next night. Then as dawn broke over the horizon, something happened which was witnessed by everyone. A little mouse burrowed up out of the sand and scampered into the undergrowth beyond the beach, his lungs filling with air. The head of the community cried out, "See that? A sign! See the sign sent by the ancestors!" "What does it mean we should do?" asked the oldest crone. "It means we must bury the object in the ground," said Salap, the boy who had discovered it in the first place. "Because if it is buried, then no one can damage it, and it can continue towards its own destiny." Every man, woman, and child spoke at once, quizzing, questioning, cooing, and demanding. As their noise grew louder than anything the island had ever experienced, the headman raised a hand in the air. "Salap was the person who found the object," he said. "So it should be Salap who decides. If he thinks the mouse was a sign that we must bury the object sent by the ancestors, then that is what we shall do." A spade was brought out, and a spot at the edge of the forest was chosen. With everyone crowding around, Salap dug a hole and placed the object into it. Before it was covered up with soil, each member of the community was allowed to reach forward and touch it one last time. Weeks passed, then months. After almost a year, Salap was wandering up from the beach with some shells he had found, when he spotted something at the edge of the forest, something that had not been there before. A little green shoot growing straight up. Calling out as loudly as he could, Salap announced what he had seen. Instantly, everyone clustered around. The oldest crone rubbed a thumb to each eye and gasped. "It was a seed!" she exclaimed. "A seed sent by the ancestors," the others sang. Many more months passed. The shoot grew and grew and grew and grew. Up, up, up. And as it grew, the people of Poptikapai would cluster around and sing songs to the plant, or rather the tree, because that's what the seed had grown into, a magnificent palm, unlike any other on the island. On some nights, when the summer storms raged and the people clustered together to sing, they would take it in turns to remember the time when the mysterious object was found by the little boy, Salap, the little boy who was now a grown man. They would remember how they all fought because they loved the object and because they wanted to make use of it. And they would remember that only by planting did they come to realize it was in actual fact a seed that, by growing into a tree, could be loved and celebrated by all. Many more years passed. Eventually, Salap had great-grandchildren. One afternoon, as they waded through the shallows in the search of shells, one of them called out on their way back from the sea. "Look, look," she called. All the people of Poptikapai clustered around. "What's wrong?" "Look up at the magical tree, the one which all talk about all the time." Every face looked up at the tree, then every mouth gasped. You see, high above the tree's trunk were a clutch of coconuts growing, just like the one Salap had found as a boy. With time, the coconut grew to maturity, and they were planted in the forests, so that they could reach their destiny and cause no jealousy. And when those seeds grew into palms and had coconuts of their own, some were planted and others were taken into the waves and released, so that they could travel over the oceans and give joy to others across the sea.